Okay, and we are live. Okairi, welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today I am back with another episode of Page Doing with my wonderful co-hosts, PL Stuart and Steve from Steve Talks Books. And today, our guest is none other than royalty of indie and self-pub fantasy, Mr. Rob J. Hayes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure I class as royalty. I don't have a crown. I've got like a few hats, but no crown.
I didn't warn you ahead of time. That was my fault. I should have told you. But typically, before we get started picking your brain, I would like to give you a chance to do a little bit of a self-introduction, if you wouldn't mind, who you are and how you kind of found yourself in this space with us today.
Okay. So, in case anyone doesn't know who I am, how dare you? I'm Rob J. Hayes. I'm a British science fiction and fantasy, mostly fantasy author, with many books. I think it's 18 books published now, or it might be 19. I'm not entirely sure. I lose track of these things. From Never Die, which is a sort of Asian sword and sorcery type thing, and the other books in the Mortal Techniques series there, to Along the Razor's Edge and The War Eternal, which is like a dark epic fantasy. I've got The Heresy Within. That was my debut. That's like grim, dark as sin fantasy, that sort of thing. And then Titan Hoppers is my science fiction one, which is more sort of young adult progression fantasy. So I write all over the board, everything that takes my interest, basically. I'm like, oh, I'm going to write a book about that. Which is probably why I have like 6 series on the go at the moment or something. It's ridiculous. And how I got here, I don't know how I got here. I just wandered in and these people decided to put me on camera.
Yeah, we wrangled you.
Yeah, although I did foolishly agree to eat a page live on camera because it's called page doing.
So for those of you who are joining us now, and I'll bring it up later, a little bit later in the stream when it happens, but Rob has agreed to actually, for the first time in page doing history, chew a page. And there may or may not.
This exact book. This one.
Yes, be a giveaway for said book. So you will have a book that Rob has actually chewed a page out of. So we'll start that giveaway a little bit later in the stream. But
I'll try not to get any drool on it. It'll just be a clean tear. It's fine.
I can't wait. So we can begin the brain picking now, as I mentioned. But we had a couple things that we wanted to start off with asking you. One of them being, I guess, maybe a personal opinion or a personal question from me, inspired by the War Eternal. If you guys can see behind these beautiful special edition books, I am a War Eternal fangirl. There's also, Death's Beating Heart, Sins of the Mother, books 4 and 5, or 5 and 4 respectively, of the series. And not only in this series, in others as well, your main character is often unlikable. And I wouldn't even say morally gray. I would say morally black almost. And they are not, you don't try to moralize away this aspect of their character. And yet I find myself rooting for this character. And I'm not alone in that sentiment. And I wanted to kind of ask you how you go about establishing that kind of character. How do you go about making that the point of view we follow and not making us hate them as we follow this perspective?
Okay. Eska's a very weird one. In many ways, I wanted her to be unlikable from the beginning, because I wanted her to be like a foil to the types of characters you get like in Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind, like, because there's a very similar style to the way that Quoth, whatever you pronounce his name, tells his story, in that it's telling it from a future version of himself talking about his past. And I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do very much the other end of the spectrum. So with Quoth, he's very much, you can tell he's narcissistic. I hate the character, by the way. He's narcissistic. He's completely in love with himself. He's arrogant, and everything he does is the right thing. Even when he makes like a stupid decision or whatever, it turns out that no, it's the right thing to do because he's the best and all of that lot. And I mean, that's fine. You get it a lot, especially in certain other genres as well. Like it's like a hallmark of progression fantasy for the most part. But I wanted to do it completely the other way around. I wanted to switch on its head. So I wanted Eska to be this character who, yes, she does make stupid decisions and she is a bit narcissistic. She thinks the world revolves around her. But the thing is, she's the first person to call herself out as well. She's the first person to say, hey, I was a bitch. This was a stupid idea, all of that sort of thing. So I think that's sort of, it's a large part in the way of why or how I tried to make her not exactly likable, but to make people be able to understand her, empathize with her a bit more, because she's the type of person who have you ever had that thing where you sort of like you wake up in the middle of the night and you'll just think, oh God, that thing I did 10 years ago, I was such a dick or something like that. It's just this random little memory that just like pops into your head and you just start feeling anxious about it. And I'm fairly certain most people have experienced that sort of like anxiety that just pops up. And so I wanted to use that to make people be able to relate a bit more to Eska. So she does do that sort of thing where because she's telling the story of her life, she occasionally just looks back and goes, yeah, that thing I did, I was such an idiot. So it gives people that sort of like avenue to just relate to her a little bit, which I think is probably the most important way to try and get people to not like but understand a unlikable character, to get them to relate to them in a personal way. So okay, they may be making stupid decisions, they may be making morally reprehensible decisions, but as long as they're internally consistent and you can understand why they're making that decision, you may not necessarily dislike them for making the decision, if that makes any sense.
It does. Speaking of Eska specifically, there are several scenes where what she does is objectively reprehensible. I'm thinking specifically about the scene underground earlier in the series, but because you use the word internal consistency, for me, I was like, oh, well, that checks out. Like Eska would do that. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point.
She's part of it is you can see why she's ended up like this. So without too many spoilers, just in case, it's like, Eska she's very damaged in the way that, at the age of 6, she was basically torn away from her family and sent to almost like a boarding school, but a boarding school where they were half tortured and programmed to believe that the neighboring nation were just horrible enemies, less than human beasts, because they were trying to be made into weapons. And she bought into it wholesale. So she was quite zealous in her sort of like nationalistic pride in that sort of sense. She believed that this neighboring nation was evil, and that her nation was good and she was doing the right thing. And then her side lost the war, and she's sent to prison, basically. This all happens before the book begins, pretty much, so there's not much in the way of spoilers, just setting that bit up. So you can kind of understand why she's so broken and angry, and it's a lot of those fuel her decisions, even when she's making a decision that's just it's a stupid decision, you shouldn't do that, but you can kind of see why, because it's like her anger is getting the better of her, or because she believes something which, even though is blatantly false, she believes it because that's what she's been brought up to believe, that's what she was programmed to believe, basically. So I certainly tried to get that sort of like internal consistency down, where you can see why she's making the decisions she's making, even when they're bad decisions.
I I absolutely.
That's
Sorry, go ahead.
that's something.
I'm not getting any.
Oh, you're muted.
Any sound
Sorry.
coming through there.
So
Oh,
apologies. What a noob mistake. No, my computer froze for a second, so I wasn't sure about the timing. So take it away, Pio.
No, I apologize, Taylor. I was just going to say that I personally absolutely love unlikable characters. I write them myself, and it really takes a certain skill, as Taylor had highlighted, to write an unlikable character and yet make them engaging, compelling. Because I remember reading an article. It was by a senior traditional publishing executive that said, we can't sell a book with an unlikable protagonist. I can't do it. That's why if one of those manuscripts fell across my desk, I couldn't do it. Whereas I think part of the beauty of being a self-published author is that, we have the freedom to, write what we want to write because, we don't have to necessarily appease a publisher who feels that what we're writing isn't marketable specifically because our main character is unlikable. So I guess I just wanted to ask Rob, like, so, and you're, and I hope to get into this a bit later. Like we would all consider you certainly a self-published fantasy star and one of the more established ones. So is this so? If you were going to say, for example, in the future, be traditionally published, if that was something you aspired to be, would you still? I'm curious. Would you still pitch an unlikable character to an agent and a trad publisher, knowing that that's something that perhaps that side of the industry isn't that fond of, or they don't believe you can sell?
I mean, it would it would certainly depend on the book. I don't think I'd set out to sort of like go, I'm going to write another unlikable character and pitch it. But I don't think they are unsellable. I don't think they're even unsellable in the trad sphere of things. I mean, if you look at let's go with Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire, which was a major inspiration to the War Eternal itself anyway. Like, Jorg is not likable. The guy's a straight up sociopath. It's horrible.
Yeah.
You look at something like Joe Abercrombie. I mean, I was actually speaking to my mother earlier today. She's reading First Law for the first time herself. And she pointed out, it's like, none of the characters are likable. Not a single one of them. And she's constantly looking for a likable character to sort of like latch onto and say, this is who I'm supporting. And she can't. And yeah, you sort of like, I was thinking back through like reading First Law and the standalones as well. And I'm like, I may have gotten to sort of like invested in certain characters, but none of them were particularly likable. No, I think the character I liked most was Koska. Yeah, it's Koska, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because he's a drunkard and he's fun, but he's not likable. Like, so, and I mean, Joe Abercrombie's a massive author. Mark Lawrence is a pretty big author himself as well. And I'm sure there are countless other examples as well. So I don't think that unlikable characters are impossible to sell. I just don't think that they appeal to the broader market, maybe. But they certainly do in the grimdarker sphere of things. So I don't think I'd shy away from pitching another unlikable character to my agent and therefore publishers. But I wouldn't go out of my way to sort of like write another one and pitch it personally. But I think part of that too is the fact that I've already kind of done it with the War Eternal, and I kind of want to do something else for a while.
Yeah.
So,
does your mom read your books?
She does. Funnily enough, she didn't used to. My mother used to be my biggest fan without ever reading any of my books. But about 6 years ago, she decided she was going to pick up one of my books and read it. And funnily enough, she really liked it. So she then read all the rest of my books. Turned out she's quite a voracious reader. And then she went, I want more. I want more books to read, so I started recommending her fantasy books to pick up and read. And my sister, who's also a big fantasy reader, started recommending other books to her as well. And now my mum reads more fantasy books than I do. She goes through like one every week or so, and I'm just like, I can't keep up.
I love that. She needs to be a beta reader for you. At this
She
point.
is actually these days. Both my mum and my sister, they're two of my alpha readers, not beta readers. They're my alpha readers. So they're the ones I sort of send it to, because I know if the book's terrible, they will tell me, but they also won't be too harsh if it needs fixing. So it's like, okay, they're the ones I'm just like, is this book any good? Please tell me, but don't tell me too honestly. And then I can make any fixes, and then I'll send it to my beta readers, who they're the ones that will drag me over the hot coals.
Right. I love that. What a happy ending. I want to take just a moment here to put some comments on the screen, because there's some wonderful people with us here. Hold on a second. We have Esme. Esme, thank you so much for coming. She says, I've been looking forward to this. You and me too, girl. Chris is here. Hi, Chris. Hi, guys. Hi, Taylor. Hope you have a great Sunday. I'm still sobering up after a party. It started Friday and lasted till last night. Well, I'm glad that you chose this as a relaxing, come down. Thanks for joining us.
I understand those parties. I've been to parties like that. Not anymore. I'm too old now, but I remember those sorts of parties.
They're somewhere in the hippocampus. Yeah. Hi, Chris. Esme says, Eska is a hot mess, and I love her for it. I related to her more than I'd probably like to admit. Yes.
She certainly is a hot mess.
Eska's fantastic. Yeah, when I was reading Along the Razor's Edge, I didn't remember a time where my heart beat that fast when I was reading a book, because I was so for her, in the pit. So I think I related to her, and I also so wanted her to succeed that I was heart palpitations when I sweating when I was reading it.
That's the mark of a good book. So thank you. That's actually a massive compliment.
Yeah. I have the paperback copy up here. I tapped the shit out of that, so it's a bit out of my reach at the moment. But I think Mahir is here. Howdy, hello.
Is that Mahir Wanchu?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, Mahir. He's another one of my alpha readers.
Thanks for your service. Here. Chris says it's a balance between enjoying her journey and expecting and possibly hoping she ends up in a ball of flame.
I love that.
You are not alone in hoping that happens to Eska. I think a lot of other characters would like that to happen to her.
I mean, at least once during the series, she literally ends up as a ball of flame, so...
This is true. This is true. Just a couple more. Good afternoon. Hi. Thanks for coming by.
Hey, Joao.
Get me some unlikable characters.
Yeah.
And finally here, good morning and hail. Time to drink coffee, read epic fantasy, and post orcs. Okay. Sounds good.
Orcs. We like orcs.
Okay.
We do. So just in case those who are watching have not read The War Eternal, I would like to kind of take some notes that we've all touched on thus far and ask another question, which is, you have branched out not just from dark fantasy and unlikable characters, but to so many other genres, right? So you mentioned in your intro, you've got Titan Hoppers. You've also got, oh my God, why am I blanking on your series? Never Die. The series
Never Die.
name,
Yes.
Spirits of Vengeance.
The Mortal Techniques.
Thank you. That's the name of the universe. You've got your Mortal Techniques as well, which is more kind of individual snapshots, and I wouldn't say quite lit RPG or anything like that, but it has that more of that vibe to it rather than dark fantasy. And in my opinion, from what I've seen, pretty much everything you've done has been successful. And I'm very curious how you genre hop so successfully. How do you just take your readers and say, here's Eska, but also here's some sci-fi, in space, and people are always on board with it. So I'm curious how you manage to do that.
I don't know. Okay, so not all of my books have been successful. I wrote a steampunk heist capery adventure with a bit of romance in it called It Takes a Thief to Catch a Sunrise. And then I wrote a sequel called It Takes a Thief to Start a Fire. And they did not sell well at all. They have not been successful. I still love them. I think they're a lot of fun. And it was very fun to write a book in the style of sort of Ocean's 11, where you have like heists going on with timelines zipping back and forth. So that, you know, how they get over all the complications and stuff. But yeah, they certainly didn't sell well. And in fact, that was the first time I genre hopped, and it almost stopped me from wanting to do it because it straight up killed my momentum. So basically, my first series was The Ties That Bind, which is grimdark. It's dark, and so I wrote that, and then I thought, I want to write something different. So I wrote this steampunk thing, and yeah, it killed my momentum. A lot of my readers who had started with me with The Ties That Bind just went, "This isn't what we wanted." Bah! So that's part of why it never sold very well, I think, because they just didn't want that. But the problem is, I don't want to write the same thing over and over again. I don't want to be like locked into a single world or a single set of characters or anything like that. So I've always wanted to just try different things. Part of the reason I wanted to write The War Eternal is I wanted to try writing in first person, because I've not really done it before. So I thought, I want to give it a go, especially after reading. The Farseer trilogy has always been one of my favorite series, and I love Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire, and I remember reading Skullsworn by Brian Staveley, and I was just like, oh my god, I need to write a first person fantasy. It's so good. So I've always wanted to try different things. As for how I sort of kept readers with me, I don't know. I think I just sort of, if you can deliver your enthusiasm for a book and how much you sort of love it through the page, I think that a lot of readers will come with you even if you do change genres. There may be, you may try and stretch that too far. Like, if I wrote a hard sci-fi, I would probably lose some readers. But if with something like Titan Hoppers, while it is sci-fi, it's also very much fantasy still. It gets set on a giant spaceship with little spaceships flying along next to it, like remoras around a shark. But at the same time, they're all wielding swords and they've got magical abilities and stuff. So it's still kind of fantasy there. So I think as long as you don't stretch things too far, and as long as your love as both a reader and a writer you can sort of like push that through the pages, I think you'll pull a lot of your readers along with you, no matter how many times you change genre slightly. So I just I like to write about the things that interest me, like with the Mortal Techniques series. They're very much Asian sword and sorcery, because I grew up watching like martial arts cinema and stuff. I used to sneak downstairs past midnight to watch like Jackie Chan films and stuff on TV, because in England, back when I was a youngster, we only had 4 TV channels, and there was only one that actually showed stuff like that. And for some reason, it only did it past midnight. So everybody else would be in bed, and I'd be like, I'm sneaking downstairs to watch films that I'm not technically supposed to be watching because I love them. And it's one of those things that stuck with me. So I've always watched things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Hero, and terrible ones like Volcano High, which is awful, but I love it. And I just so I remember watching one of those, and I was like, I want to write a book like this. I want to write a story like this. And luckily, I just managed to keep my own style, my own voice enough, even writing a very different sort of setting and genre in many ways, that a lot of readers just gelled with it, even though it was very different to what I'd written before. Then managed to do it again with Along the Razor's Edge. It's a bit of a sort of like wuss out answer, isn't it? Because I don't really know how I did it. I just like to change things, like to write different things. And yeah, luckily I managed to drag my readers with me.
I would argue we don't feel dragged. We're hopping right in.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to know, and this is really a burning question for me, Rob, is that you know, you started out in self-published fantasy in a different, almost a different era than the one I'm coming in as someone as a novice publishing. You know, I'm coming into a time where the landscape is like, we have the Rob Hayes, we have the Ben Galleys, we have the Michael R. Fletchers, we have the Ryan Cahills and the LL McRae's and the JD Evans and all these amazing, well-known, fairly well-known in if you know, I know it's all relative, but in the self-published landscapes. We even have a lot of self-published authors who have transitioned into, you know, almost another stratosphere of success, like the Travis Baldrys and the Will Whites, you know, New York Times bestsellers. You know, we have all of these authors. You know, you've been extremely successful at SPFBO, multiple, you know, semifinals and finals. Like two of, you know, the books that I've read from you have done really well. Fantastic books, Where Loyalties Lies and Spirits of Vengeance. And you have all these authors now who've also, on the heels of specifically SPFBO, Mark Lawrence's self-published fantasy blog off, like the Josiah Bancrofts and the Justin Lee Andersons and all these authors who've gone on to get traditionally published book deals. But this is a very different landscape, I can imagine, as to when you came into self-published fantasy. Like now, people like yourself and the Ben Galleys and the Michael Fletchers, you're the sage veterans, the, you know, the wise old senseis of this game that we breaking in new are kind of standing on the shoulders of. But what was it like when you came in? It's like, okay, I'm a self-published fantasy author. How am I gonna get someone to buy my books? How do I publish it? Like, what was it like to come in and what did things look like then? Very different from how they are now.
Oh, they were incredibly different. I've actually spoken to Ben Galley about this a couple of times because I think we both likened it to back when we started, because we started about the same time. He was 2012, his first published book, and I was 2013. And we both kind of described it as the self-published gold rush, because that's kind of what it felt like. Because, yeah, when we started, there wasn't nearly as many self-published books around, and it was still kind of new, and Amazon was pushing it because they wanted to be the platform for sort of like Kindle and indie fantasy and everything. So they were really pushing it. So a lot of the work that an author needed to do to reach an audience was actually handled by Amazon. So like a lot of people have asked me, because my first series sold really well, far better than I ever thought it would. And they said, how did you do it? And the answer is, I haven't got a clue. It was luck. I released it at the right time. I released all 3 books on the same day, so they were all there. It was like a big rapid release, but all in one day. And Game of Thrones was just in its 2nd season of TV. But the reality is that Amazon did a lot of the pushing for me back then. They were sort of like emailing their customers going, hey, have you seen this new series? Because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to establish their market. So yeah, sort of 10 years ago, it was actually a lot easier to get started as a self-published fantasy author. I've said this before, I would not want to be trying to get started these days because it's so much tougher. Like, I have so much respect for people like Ryan Cahill, who, I mean, he released his first book 2 years ago, and he's massive. I don't know how he's done that in this day and age. The guy's like dialed in or something. Yeah, I don't know. But so yeah, things were massively different. And a lot of the legwork was done for us. And it felt like a gold rush. It felt like, yeah, we could just release a book and it would just sell. So it led to some of the challenges, which is as the landscape changed, trying to then not only stay relevant, but stay in the sort of like the reader's eyes was quite difficult because Amazon started doing things differently. So you had to try and reach your readers in a different way. So it's led to a lot of challenges down the road, sort of trying to figure out how to keep reaching people once Amazon took away the support that you didn't even realize you were getting at the time. But yeah, there's these days it's a lot harder. There's so many more authors. There's so many more books that getting started is harder. And I think that I'm incredibly lucky to have started when I did and to already have a readership, to be honest.
From a marketing and sales standpoint, what are the pros and cons of a rapid release? Would you recommend, or would you ever do that again in the future?
Yeah. So from a straight up algorithmic standpoint, rapid release works incredibly well because the way that Amazon kind of works these days is you get like almost like a month grace period where they will kind of help you out for a month after you release a book. They'll send it to people. But after that, if your book's not selling well, they're not going to. That's kind of a simplistic way of looking at the sort of like the algorithm. Nobody truly understands how it works. But with a rapid release, what you're doing is you're essentially just bumping it up constantly. So you release the first book, you get a nice bump of visibility, which will hopefully lead to some more sales. And as that starts to tail away, if you then release the next book in the series, it will give a bump to the first book again. And then again with the third book, and it give it another bump. So it was kind of a way of trying to game the system, but not really game the system, more like work with it to keep bumping up the first book along with the second books to the point where I was hoping that I'd be able to get it self-sustaining, which it did for a while. It's part of why Along the Razor's Edge and The War Eternal sold so well as it did on its initial release. I don't think that releasing all three books on the same day would have the same impact these days as it did when I did it 10 years ago, because I don't think that you'd hit the same sort of like algorithmic pushes. So I think a rapid release can be useful. It's incredibly stressful. I wouldn't recommend it unless you are willing to really put in the effort. And I mean, I didn't write anything for about 5 months because I was so focused on just marketing my books and pushing them every day, doing interviews across the board, just everything I could try to do to help push it. And because you're sort of like you're releasing your first book, and then as soon as you've released your first book, you're then starting on marketing your second book while also marketing your first book. It takes all of your time. So it's certainly useful. It can help to give your book and your series a nice punch to its visibility, but it is a lot of work. So you have to be willing to and ready to put in that effort. I might do it again in the future, but I would hope not to, because I like to write, and spending 5 months not writing and just doing marketing, it was painful.
I imagine also, well, I know there are some readers who don't like to pick up a series unless it's all out. I am not one of those. I don't really understand that mentality. So for me, it's almost useful to have that carrot to dangle, like the next one's coming out next year. So I imagine as an author, it might also be a little nerve-wracking to say, okay, here's all my eggs in one basket. Here's the series. I'm releasing it in this amount of time. And then that carrot's gone, at least for that time period. And then after those releases, you just, like you said, have to kind of renew interest in it repeatedly. I imagine that would also be a bit scary as an author to be like, well, here's everything.
Oh, yeah. It certainly is, for a number of reasons. I mean, there's the part of the being a self-published author as well. It's like there's a struggle to stay sort of like in the limelight, stay relevant, and the biggest way to do that is to release a book. So if you've written a trilogy and you're like, hey, here's 1, 2, 3, and then you're like, oh, I've got nothing to release for another year or 2 years or something. It's quite scary to be like, okay, well, I've got to try and stay relevant within the the readership for the next 2 years without releasing anything. And yeah, you could certainly do that. Just with more people and more people buying your book, because it's easy to sit there and think, oh well, my book will have reached its maximum number of people. I'll have exhausted the readership, and that's a fallacy. There's no such thing, because all you have to do is look at someone like Brandon Sanderson, who sold millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions, and he's still not reached the limits of his readership. So if he hasn't, like, yeah, I'm certainly not going to. And
Right.
so yeah, but there is that sort of like that fear that, yeah, if I'm not releasing a book in the next however long, will I just drop out of everybody's mindset, and then, you know, I won't sell books. I won't sell any books for ages. And it's especially scary if it is your sole income. Yeah. As someone who this is what I do, this is my income. It's quite terrifying to sit there and go, right, well, if I'm not selling books, then I'm not making money.
Right.
So yes, it can be quite scary, but at the same time, yeah, you're the readership, the people who are sort of picking up your book, and that sort of like a lot of people won't pick up a book until they know that the series is finished. And you know, they're quite vocal about it on social media, the people that won't usually, and I don't particularly understand it, but yeah, it's a weird one. So being able to sit there and say, yeah, the series is finished is a great marketing point.
Yeah, probably a bit of the we talk about a lot on Page Chewing, the Rothfuss GRM effect of you know, feeling like you've been left hanging potentially, that with series is not finishing. But in any case, I just want to say I do have to run. I apologize. I'm upset I'm not going to get to see you chew this page.
I was just about to transition to that. Yeah.
I can do it now if you'd like. You want me to read a page now while you're here?
I want it to be done properly. I have to run off to another podcast. However, I just want to say, Rob, you're an amazing author. I'm a bit late to the party. I've only read 2 of your books yet. They are both phenomenal. Absolutely, chef's kiss. I can't wait to read more of your stuff. I'm planning to buy everything that you've written. Thank you so much for being one of those self-publishing giants that all of us who are writing now, we stand on the shoulders of yourself and people like you. And so thanks for what you do, and thanks for what you do to promote other self-published authors, especially. And all the best of success with your writing, and I hope to get to chat to you soon. I hope to steal you to get you for my 6 Elementals blog that I write on my website and cross-post on Before We Go blog. So hopefully get to do that in the soon. I'll shoot you a DM. But once again, good luck. Great to see you on camera. Stephen Taylor, love you guys as always, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, take care. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Oh, I'm never sure how to deal with praise. It scares me.
PL is fantastic at praise. He makes everyone speechless. I often say we don't deserve him, and I mean it.
We really don't.
So I was about to transition to the giveaway and you eating a page. But before we do that, we do have a friend here, Andrew, who came by just recently. So Andrew says, "Sup,
Sup."
And coffee and books, a good way to start his day. Also, he wanted to say, I love your work, Rob. I'm currently working on War Eternal, which when Andrew says he's working on a series, it means it'll be done tomorrow because he uses the speed of light. So
I don't understand how people can read that fast. I'm amazed by them. I think it's a superpower. Like I saw somebody on Twitter said they were starting Along the Racer's Edge yesterday, and I was like, oh yay. And then today they posted saying it's the first 5-star of the year, and I'm like, how did you read it so fast?
Yes, I feel like the older I get, the slower I get at reading. I'm in awe.
50 pages a day, that's a really good reading day for me.
Yes, I feel like I'm a fake booktuber sometimes because I'm like, I don't know how y'all do it. And also, he says, buy his books, he's not built for OnlyFans.
It's true.
So,
I lost my hair. Look, I'm not sexy anymore. I lost all my hair. It's gone. I can't do OnlyFans.
Well, I mean, I'll sign up if you need it. Laugh my ass off. I'm savoring it. I'm limiting myself to 1 a month. That is restraint for Andrew, actually. So now that we have some people watching, we're in the middle of the stream. Rob has decided to set page chewing history and actually eat a page while we are live. And one lucky person will get this book that he's eaten a page from in a giveaway. So if you're watching live right now, during the time it takes Rob to eat the first page of his life, I think, as well as a page chewing.
Yeah.
So we'll see how long this takes. But during that time frame, you can, in the chat, comment page chewing in all caps. And I will put your name into a raffle for a random name generator. And we'll see who wins the giveaway.
So here's the book. It's a paperback copy of Along the Razor's Edge.
Yes.
Here we go. So page ripped. It's even the title page.
I am so
there you go.
excited.
Oh, man.
And on the back, it's even got the dedication.
Oh,
for my wife and my dog. Okay.
Eat that.
Here we go.
We've got some page chewing coming in the chat, guys. So don't forget to enter. What's the taste like?
Woody. I could probably have done this a little bit differently. I think chewing it in bits, maybe, but I just went for the entire page in one go.
Oh, man.
All right. You got water. You're prepared. I'm seeing a couple
water
entries
and tea,
here.
just in case. Yeah. Lovely.
Oh, man. I thought this only happened in movies, when people want to get rid of evidence and they eat a piece of paper. It's like I've never witnessed it.
I imagine in movies, it's probably not actual paper. It's probably like, would you get rice paper or something?
Have you ever eaten paper, Steve?
I don't think so. I can't say I have, no. Well, we'll have to do it, though. No, we have to do it sometime.
Nah, we can't be shown up by a guest if we're hosts here.
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not the most flavoursome.
It is entertaining, though, that's for sure.
It is. Oh, my goodness. And that is going to be a priceless copy of that book.
Oh. Make sure you have water on hand if you do this.
Okay. It's taken a minute, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? I think the smart way would have been to do it in stages rather than just one big go.
We'll learn from your experience so that when we do this, we'll be good to go.
Taking notes.
Oh, Andrew says, I have eaten paper before.
Yeah, he did the chip challenge, so,
That's true.
Right. Done.
It's done. Yes. I needed to have some theme music or something for that. I should have prepared better.
So there you go.
Wow.
Here's the book with its page ripped and everything.
Oh my gosh.
I will be I'll sign that and everything and get it sent to whoever wins.
Wow, that's cool.
You have set page chewing history. I am so excited. And also set the bar a little high for us hosts. Which page should I eat? I don't know. These are staying pristine, so it won't be one of these. But
I wouldn't recommend those. The War Eternal hardbacks have quite sort of meaty pages, I think. You want to do something with a bit of a smaller, softer, thinner page.
Right. Ava's congratulating you. Got some laughter.
Lovely. It's a good job I didn't have lunch beforehand.
Here it says, holy cow, actual page chewing.
I felt a bit like a cow while doing it. There's a lot of chewing.
Well, I've got all of the entries, and I think we definitely want to pick your brain a little more while we still have you. So if people don't mind in the chat, I promise I will not cheat in the background, but I will put everyone's name when we're off of live. I'll put everyone's name in a random generator, and I will get in contact with you after the stream. I think everyone here is either on the forum or on Twitter, so I will be sure to post, as well as Steve and I will probably post on our community tabs as well, so you guys will see that whose name comes out. So yay, there will be a lucky winner. That was delightful. So one thing that I have been curious about for a while is I read the Spirits of Vengeance. This is the first book that I've read in your Mortal Technique series. And my understanding is that they are standalones and you can read them outside of release order. And I'm someone who has lived in Japan for a long time. And I find that I tend to personally decide not to read some specifically Japanese-inspired fantasy because I know that things might bother me that won't bother a normal reader or a typical reader. And I find that I'm harsher in those reviews. So I tend to avoid those books inspired by that because I think that's kind of unfair. The standard to which I hold those versus the standard to which I might hold a differently inspired book. But because it was part of Spiffbo, of course, I picked it up because I'm part of the team Before We Go blog. And I was incredibly impressed by the research that clearly went into it. I'm very much into yokai culture myself, or not culture. It's a weird way to put that. Yokai mythology myself. I even have a series about that on my channel. And I was very fascinated by the way you decided to tweak some of those mythologies and play with them in a way that showed that you truly knew about it and understood it and made them more interesting. And I was just curious, when you, not just that book, but when you're writing a book inspired by a specific culture or wearing that inspiration on your sleeve, how do you go about researching it? How do you go about deciding what you're going to include and not include? Because I was just extremely impressed by it and I loved it. So I'm curious how you went about that process.
Well, I mean, part of it is I've always sort of loved the cultural idea of something like Japan's feudal era and stuff. I found it absolutely fascinating. I've been watching anime and TV programs about that sort of thing for absolutely years and years and years. So I've always been a bit in love with it. I've never actually visited Japan or certain areas of China, which I'd love to, but I've never managed to get to. So I wanted to make it feel not authentic because it is a second world, but there's the risk where you kind of like, as someone who's not part of the culture, if you are writing within a certain culture, you can accidentally fetishize it in some ways, which is something I was aware that was possible, and I desperately wanted to stay away from. I wanted to treat it with, the sort of like the respect that it deserved. So a lot of my research was focused around getting the details right, because I think that that's often a large part of it. You can just sort of like gloss over the details and just go for, oh well, it looks right. So it's almost like trying to make it a set rather than an actual like village or something. So yeah, it was mostly just focusing on the little details. So even with things like clothing, how is a samurai's kimono sort of like put together? What's the different parts of it? Same with like a katana or something. What are the different parts of the katana? It's not just like, oh yes, it's a katana, and then you just talk about the hilt, because it's not called a hilt. So yeah, it's focusing on the details to make sure that it feels as authentic as possible, to stop it from feeling like it's fetishized at any point, basically. which is how I sort of approached it. It did involve a lot of research. A lot of it was done on the internet, and research on the internet is spotty at best. So it was a lot of correlating. I'd have like 6 different websites up trying to check the different details of things to make sure I got it
right.
And as for sort of like the yokai, I desperately wanted them to I desperately wanted to stick to the sort of like how they are established, how they are presented, but also put a different twist on them, because it is a secondary world. It's not Earth, so they were always going to be slightly different. And I wanted, in many ways, to, especially in Spirits of Vengeance, I wanted to anime size them. So I would take a yokai like the Anenra, which is like the smoke yokai, and I sort of like figured out a way. I was trying to figure out how to make it so that if it was in an anime, how it would look really, really sort of like cool and striking, and what special powers it might have if it was more than just sort of like here's a spirit, if it was like an actual sort of character type thing. So yeah, a lot of it was just sort of like correlating between the different sort of influences I've had and trying to make them all gel together, I guess.
Right. Well, the passion definitely came through, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself reading it, because I would recognize, be like, I like the twist that you did there. I don't want to give anything away about the book, because I think part of the joy is discovering those yokai as they come up in the story. But I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I think it made me realize that maybe I'm avoiding a genre I don't have to, because people who put the work in, clearly, like you did, it's awesome, So I think I wanted to thank you for that.
There are a lot of really good sort of like Asian inspired fantasy that I've read. However, I will admit that most of the ones I've read have been by people with sort of like the Asian heritage. I've read things like Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee. There was the Bone Shard's
daughter.
Emperor. No, Bone Shard daughter. That's it, isn't
Bone
it?
Shard daughter. Yes.
By the name escapes me. Oh, I forget names. I'm terrible with them.
No pressure.
Anyway, if anybody in chat can remember it, please do remind me. So I've read those, but I also think that people like Will White actually does a decent job with Cradle as well. And I think a lot of it is again, he just has the respect for the culture and the genre that he's writing in, and that's what really comes across. It's not just like, here's a different setting that I can try and write in. It's having actual respect for it and love for the medium, basically the different mediums that stories are told of in, I think.
No, it comes through. Absolutely comes through. I had Mihir said, Rob, all I wanted was a sequel to Never Die called Never Die Harder.
Yeah, well, when I started writing Pawn's Gambit, there was a lot of jokes we told us, like, what should number 2 be called? Never Die Harder, Never Die Again, Never Die with a Vengeance, Never Die Twice. all of the film style jokes. Andrea Stuart, somebody said in the chat,
Stuart.
Thank you. I completely blanked on the name. I'm sorry.
Yes. I'm also horrendous with names. So then also we had some questions earlier in the chat that I wanted to give a chance for you to answer, because they were quite solid. Where did it go?
Did osmosis kick in while I was eating the page? Recite everything you ate.
What you had mentioned.
Sorry, I was reading one of the comments.
Oh, no, it's okay. This is kind of connected to what you mentioned earlier. We had talked about but Andrew asked, how did Spiffbo help your career? So we did talk about how you entered during the gold mine, or not the gold mine, the gold rush, right, era of self-publishing and how that's different from today. But Spiffbo is a very unique, I think, space. And your name is well known in those circles as well. So I think this is a great question. How did Spiffbo, did it seem to have a long-term effect? Was it a short-term boost? Was it, how did it seem to affect it?
I think, yeah, for me, Spiffbo has definitely been more of a long-term, more gradual effect than some. I know, like, for some, it sort of like it catapulted them into a lot of people's reader sphere and really helped kickstart their career. People like Josiah Bancroft, he was quite open with, before Spiffbo, his book Settle and Ascend had sold something like 50 copies and been out for 3 years or something. It was going nowhere. And then he didn't even do that well in Spiffbo. He was kicked out in the semi-finals. He didn't even make the finals, I don't think. But because then Mark Lawrence sort of like gave it a read and loved it and talked about it, it really helped kickstart his career, and it got him a traditionally published deal and all that lot. And I think for a lot of other people, they've had very similar experiences, especially the ones who have been picked up by traditional publishers. It's obviously really helped kickstart their career. And then also for people like M.L. Wang with Sword of Kaigan, which she obviously that hasn't been sold to a traditional publisher, but and it was doing quite well beforehand. But I think that Spiffbo really helped catapult it into a lot more people's bookshelves, onto the bookshelves, and word of mouth then spread from there. I think for me, none of my books have been catapulted in that same sort of way. Where Loyalties Lie, which is the book of mine that won it, it's never sold particularly well even after winning it. It got a nice little boost, but then that sort of trailed off. And then Never Die was a finalist, and I was the first author to ever have 2 separate books as finalists, which was quite nice. So I think that's the sort of way that it's helped me. It's helped me sort of establish myself as an author, within the sort of like the self-published circles, who is consistently outputting good books at a decent rate, which is why I've been able to sort of like be a finalist twice. So I think for me, that's how it's really helped. It's helped because my name is mentioned multiple times within multiple series seasons of Spiffbo. Is that what I say?
Right.
Seasons of them?
Seasons?
Yeah.
Versions?
So, my name sort of seeps into people's minds without them realizing it. They're like, oh, yes, Rob Hayes, I've heard of him. Oh, yes,
right.
That's the plan all along. So, yeah, I don't think it's sort of catapulted me in any way, but it's definitely been a much more long-term benefit of being in Spiffbo multiple times. I've been in it 5 times now. 5 times I've entered Spiffbo.
It's commonplace for you now. Twice. Put this year's one in there, see what it does, how it does, right?
Exactly. It's. I don't see there's any downside to it, and whether or not you've been in it before or what, it's going to help with your career, because if you've released a book, not everybody is going to know about that. Even your readership, you can't reach them all constantly, so they won't. There are people who may not know that you've released a book. So if you're then entering in Spiffbo, people who are following that will be like, "Oh, I didn't realize they had a new book out. I'll check it out." So yeah, I don't think there's a downside to re-entering it personally, and it can only help us establish you as having multiple books and multiple series that are worth reading, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I imagine if you haven't done it before, or I've heard other authors say it's their first time in it, and it's very nerve-wracking and nail-biting, and I can't, being on the other end of it, I can imagine what it would feel like. So do you have any advice for people if it's their first time? Maybe they made the finalist for the first time, or do you have any advice for how to handle that kind of pressure cooker feeling, considering you've been in it twice?
Yeah, it's find a group of authors who are going through the same thing or who've been through the same thing. I didn't have that with Where Loyalties Lie the first time I was through. I mean, I had a group of other friends, but I wasn't like in a group with the other finalists or anything.
Right.
So that first time, I was incredibly nervous the entire time. Every time a review came out, I was like nervously checking the Spiffbo page, going, it was nerve-wracking. It was terrifying, all of that. But the second time, while it was still nerve-wracking with Never Die, I was in a group with the other finalists. Basically, we had our little messenger group, and we'd all sort of like, we were all chatting to each other every day, and every time a new review came out, there'd either be sort of like congratulations or consolidations, and it was a safe space where you could be like, this person said this about my book, and everybody else would just be like, yeah, no, we understand, it's horrible, they're evil. So having that support group of the other finalists was really helpful. And I think that's probably the best way to deal with it. I know that last year's group did a similar thing with Fletcher and Crystal Matar and all of those. They had their own little support group, and they said the same thing. Like, it's been incredibly useful to them at the time, and also they've kept us friends moving forward. So it's really helpful in that way. So that would be my main piece of advice. Find yourself a support group of authors who you can get on with and who will listen to you bitch if you get a horrible review, but also congratulate you when you get a lovely review.
Right. Everyone needs a group chat where they can say what they wouldn't say on main, right?
Absolutely. Things you can't say on Twitter, but you can go in little group chats and go,
Exactly. Exactly. That's great advice. We had a comment earlier as well, which Mihir did a wonderful job answering in the comments for you. But I wanted to give you a chance to also answer it, which is, Rob, I've never read any book of yours. Which one would you recommend? So considering you have a plethora of books to choose from, is there a starter that you would choose?
I always like, it so depends on what you want to read. Here's a little plug. If you go to my website, www.robjhayes.co.uk.
It'll be in the description down below for anyone curious.
I have a nice little sort of page which has all of my series starters and a brief sort of like what they're about, what genre they sit in, and what other books they might be like. So with something like Along the Razor's Edge, it's like, hey, it's a dark epic fantasy with a badass female protagonist and a mysterious world with a hard magic system that gets opened up over time and stuff. And if you like the works of, say, Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy or Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire, then this is the book to start with. So there's that, and then like,
I wonder, how many times have you done that elevator pitch? That's the real question.
Quite a few. But if you fancy something a bit more sort of like standalone and a bit more just fun and adventure, start with Never Die, which is Asian sword and sorcery. So if you like things like Will White's Cradle, maybe, and other books. My mind's blanking. Anyway, so maybe start with that one. So yeah, go to my webpage and that will list all my series starters with nice little comparisons as well, so you can choose which one to start with. But if it's just a straight up recommendation, I will always say either Along the Razor's Edge or Never Die, because they're just excellent places to start.
Yes. Yes. And I also mean this in the best way possible, that when you start reading Along the Razor's Edge, Eska's voice is so clear from the beginning. You will know if the book is for you or not in the first chapter. So it's a good one.
I have a number of reviews that on Amazon that are just like, I DNF this after one page. It's like, cool.
Wow.
Well, if it's for the person, it's definitely for the person, because I was hooked after page 1, so it's pretty clear whether it's for you or not.
But those reviews sell books. I mean, I buy books because of reviews like that. So
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
One of my most successful marketing strategies is to post 1-star reviews. So I've got a nice little graphic from Never Die, which is just like a picture of the book, and then I put like quotes from 1-star reviews all around it, and some of them are brilliant. They're like, "It's a garbage train wreck of an ending." People saying, "I wish I could go back in time and unread this book." And funnily enough, people love that little graphic. It helps sell books. Every time I post it, I get a few people that are like, "I'm sold. I've bought a copy. I can't wait to read it." I'm like, "Excellent." But
that brings me so much joy to hear that, because there's been such discourse recently about how negative reviews shouldn't be allowed in certain spaces, and there's just been a lot of that bouncing back and forth, and it just brings me joy to hear that you have found a way to connect with negative reviews like that, because there's humor to be found.
Reviews aren't actually for authors. That's what feedback is for. Reviews are for readers. So negative reviews are just as important as positive ones. Don't give any of my books negative reviews. I will hunt you down. But no, I wouldn't necessarily recommend for an author to go trawling through their negative reviews to find the good quotes, though, because it's pretty soul destroying.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine so. You got to protect your own space, right? That's why they're separate.
Absolutely. But yeah,
and also
if you are so sadomasochistic, is it sadomasochistic?
I think that's the one.
So,
yeah.
If you feel like flagellating yourself, get a whip on the back and everything, then yeah, do feel free to trawl through your negative reviews and find some awesome quotes that can help sell books, because you'd be amazed. Yeah, negative reviews can really sell books.
Yes, they can. And as a booktuber, I've done the video before where you read 1-star reviews of your favorites, and so one of the ones that made me laugh so hard I almost cried was, I don't know if you could tell, but I like John Gwynne. And so there's a battle scene in there where he specifically points out a troll's testicles. And so he's super good at battle scenes, but it's a very specific point to bring up. And the person in the review gave it like a 1-star, and they said, I dropped out at troll's testicles, and I lost it when I was recording, because I was like, I can't really be mad at this. Like, it's a 5-star book for me, but that's a good point.
Which book is it? Because I've only read his first series, but I've got all of his books. So
it's The Shadow of the Gods.
I'm looking forward to reading that now. I want to read about troll testicles.
It's a very specific moment. That was a choice, trademarked.
I'm definitely looking forward to getting that one started now.
Oh God!
I've still got to read this second trilogy first, though.
Yeah, I haven't read any of his previous series. So I read The Shadow of the Gods and just finished The Hunger of the Gods and loved them both. So I will read one day. I'll read the backlist, but definitely.
Oh, it's definitely worth it. The Faithful and the Fallen books are fantastic. They've got some of the best character development. He's an absolute master at character development. The way taking some of his characters through this journey, and you just like it was weird. The first time I started book 1, Malice, I was like, I wasn't really getting it, and I kind of DNF'd it. I wasn't in the mood, and then I thought, I really want to give it a go though. So I picked it up and read through it, and then towards I think it was about halfway through the second book, I was like, I'm really invested in the characters. Just seeing the way that they've been changing throughout like a book and a half so far, it's just I'm really invested. And then I just binged the entire series after that. It was brilliant.
Interesting to hear you say that, because I felt the same thing. The first book, I was like, I really like this world and I'm liking the characters, but I'm not super connected. And then the second book, I was like, I'm in. And if he does anything to these characters, I'm going to throw a hissy fit.
Oh, God, yeah. So. There was definitely that sort of thing in the first season. It was like, if he kills off Macwin...
Right. Well, I have felt the same way during during the War Eternal at times. I'm like, if you touch this character, there've been times. I haven't read the last one yet, so I'm a little terrified.
Oh God, really? Which character do you not want me to kill?
I'm not going to name names because then I don't want to know. I don't want to know by your reaction. I don't want to know. But yeah, definitely know that feeling.
Okay, well, I'll just warn you then. Characters do die in the final book.
I'm
Yeah.
like it's Zen.
Maniacal
I'm going to
laughter.
send you a message and just like with crying emojis, and you'll know I've read it. Also, we are unfortunately coming up on time because these go so quickly, as they always do. But I always have a final question to ask our guests, which is, I'm obsessed with mythology and origin stories, as I think I mentioned earlier in this interview. So I always like to ask our guests, what is a story that you remember from your life that you think impacted the way that you love stories today? So it doesn't have to be a book, but it could be a movie that you remember, or a video game that you played, any medium through which you took in a story that you think really impacted you and really fostered the love of telling stories that you so clearly have. Because I think that says a lot about where we find ourselves today as readers. So I'm wondering if there's a story that sticks out for you from your life.
There are actually there are a ton. There are so many stories that have really stuck with me over the years, and sometimes it's like the story, or it's an element of the story. Like thinking through across all the mediums, something like Baldur's Gate 2, the computer game. I first played that when I was like 12, maybe. And it's a game that's really stuck with me, and it's entirely down to the antagonist, character called John Irenicus, who is such a well put together villain, that you really he's a villain, he's a bastard, but he's so well put together that you really sort of like get to know him, and kind of understand where he's coming from, even though what he's doing is evil, but he's doing it for his own reasons that make sense. So yeah, that's he's certainly one that's stuck with me. And like there's so many. Like Full Metal Alchemist is a series that I'm not sure any other series or books of anything that have had quite as much of an impact on me as that anime has. It's just I love it. I love the characters, I love the world, I love the magic system, everything about it. That one's always been a massive influence on me. And then like the Farseer trilogy. There's so many. The Artifacts of Power by Maggie Fury. They were the first books that made me want to write. I remember reading that series, and I was just like, I want to give this. I'd always been like writing an odd short story here, there, or whatever. But I remember reading The Artifacts of Power and thinking, I want to write a fantasy story, a book with characters that change, that go on a journey and everything. And my first attempts were absolutely awful, but it was from reading The Artifacts of Power that made me want to give that a go. So, God, yeah, there's just everything. I take inspiration from everything, and it all makes me come up with new ideas, and I'm always wanting to sort of like, create a new story world around them. Taking inspiration from everything. I remember I'm writing a series at the moment called Age of the God Eater. Mahir's in the channel. He knows it. He's read it. He loves it. I'm writing this story called Age of the God Eater at the moment. It's my big epic fantasy that's going to be coming next year. The first book's called Herald, and it's set in a world where the magic and immortality is gained by people devouring angels. So angels are literally hunted down and carved up and eaten for the power that their divinity contains. And it's
I'm
set
sold
sort of
already by that tagline. And I see
It-
I see Steve's eyes sparkling. He likes the dark shit. So
yeah, oh,
I'm in.
it's definitely dark, and the first book, Herald, starts 1,000 years after the godless kings laid siege to heaven and killed and devoured God, which is why Age of the God Eater. Anyway, and the entire book exploded into my mind from a single lyric or a single line from a song. The song was by a band called Rise Against. The song was called "To Them These Streets Belong," and the lyric was, "My hands are soaking in the blood of angels." And for some reason, I heard that lyric, and this entire story just exploded into my mind. And I spent I think most of a day just like with my notepad, just writing down ideas, and then I wrote the entire prologue as well. And I was like, and yeah, it's just got bigger and bigger since then. And I'm to the point where I'm now writing a prequel trilogy along with the main trilogy.
really?
Yeah.
Oh my
and
God.
again, it all started from a song lyric. So yeah, I take inspiration from everywhere. It's hard to nail like a specific one. It's just everything.
Well, I love that stretched across games, books, songs, because those things are stories. That's why the question specifically doesn't say books, right? Because all of those things are ways that we tell stories to each other. So
Absolutely.
And you've completely sold me on the God Eater thing. And Mihir's in the chat saying, I love it, and he needs more. So consider me convinced. Mihir says, Steve, you will love it. Yep. I saw as soon as it was like angel eating, his eyes sparkled. So he's in.
It's very much an epic fantasy. I think people who like John Gwynne will actually quite like it. Funnily enough, it's the book that secured me my agent, John Jarrold, who also originally represented John Gwynne with his Faithful of the Fallen. So hey, there we go. But yes, when is it planned to release? There's a question. Next year. I will be self-publishing it next year. I may actually be kickstarting it later this year, so I can do all sorts of interior artwork and everything as well. But yes, the first book in both the main trilogy and the prequel trilogy will both be releasing next year, 2024. I don't know exactly when.
You heard it here, folks. All right. Not only did Rob eat a page, but you also got to hear about his series coming out soon.
I'm very excited about it. I don't know if you can tell. I get giddy when talking about it. I've been writing it for like 4 years now, and I'm just like, I can't wait for people to read it.
Finally, your baby's going out, right, into the world.
Exactly.
So.
It's going to be my first big sort of like release since The War Eternal as well, which was I was terrified of releasing The War Eternal. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Don't worry about it. I'll stop.
No, that's fine. It's totally fine.
I was absolutely terrified of releasing The War Eternal because Eska. I honestly had no idea if people would like her, hate her, whatever. So I was absolutely terrified of releasing her into the world. This is my first big release since sort of like releasing Eska. I've released like a couple of Mortal Techniques books, but I was already sure people would love those. And then Titan Hoppers, which is just like, hey, progression fantasy, why not? But this is my first sort of return to dark fantasy, which is my main love.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that brings it full circle, right? How to write an unlikable character. You took a big risk with Eska, and I would say it worked out. So now people know that they can come to your books for that. So I think that threshold has been reached for sure. And I think characters killing and eating angels is quite in that realm, the unlikable realm. So
the not to talk too much about it because it's not releasing for another year yet. But yes, the one of the major characters is one of the godless kings, who is the main one hunting down the angels, and he's not the most likable of characters. I mean, apart from being immortal at this point, he's been alive for 1,000 years. He has an interesting perspective on things.
Gosh, I get more intrigued the more I hear. So you've sold a book here.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we don't want to take up too much of your time. You're coming up on an hour and a half. So I want to, in case people are in the chat or watching this back and have missed the beginning when you kind of introduced yourself, I want to give you another chance at the end here to kind of sign off, say where people can find you if they want to keep an eye out for the God Eater series, or any sales you have or beautiful editions of your books coming up. Where can they look for you? Where can they find you?
Well, you can find me at www.robjhayes.co.uk, which is my website. I also have a newsletter, which is an excellent way to keep up with my releases and everything. And I also, with that newsletter, I also post links to my monthly blog where I list upcoming books by other self-published authors. My self-published fantasy release blog, which is a good way to potentially find new self-published authors to read. I'm also on Twitter. My handle is @RobOfTheHaze. I'm also on Facebook. My Facebook page is The Heresy Within, which is the name of my first book. And then, I'm around. You'll find me. It's fine. I occasionally pop onto like Reddit Fantasy, and I have an Instagram account. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm there.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Brave man. Reddit Fantasy is a whole new world that I have not delved into.
I'm very much a lurker.
You're a lurker?
I read a lot of the posts, but I only post occasionally. And most of the time, it's just when somebody wants a book recommendation, and I'm like, well, nobody's mentioning self-published books, indie books, so I just nip in there with well, have you read Paternus by Dirk Ashton?
That is another one that's been on my TBR for an embarrassing long amount of time. I need
you have to read it. Paternus is amazing. I love it so much. And I'm not saying that just because I wrote the book, but I did. I wrote all of Dirk's books.
I'm sure that he's not going to dispute that in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's all right. He wrote all of mine, and I don't know, Fletcher's Gerbil.
Ghostwriting for each other.
Fletcher's Gerbil.
It's a long-running joke. Me, Fletcher, and Dirk wrote each other's books.
Great. All right. Well, Steve, what about you? Where can they find you?
You can find me at Steve Talks Books on YouTube, or Steve Talks Movies on YouTube, or on pagetune.com.
I'm not used to it being that short yet. I know you're cutting down on like what platforms you're on, but I'm used to you having.
I'm trying to. There's just too many, and I feel bad when I have messages sitting in my Goodreads inbox for like a month, and people are like, trying to contact me, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't check this that often. So here's the answer to your question from a month ago.
People,
Goodreads is a mess.
I know.
They
I
really
hate
should not be
Goodreads.
trying to. No one should be trying to contact anyone on that website.
I really hate Goodreads. I really do. There's just too many platforms, so I'm trying to cut down.
I guess, why would Amazon bother changing it? But I know we're about to sign off, but I have to get all I'm asking for is a way to DNF a book without having to say that I read it, put it on a different weird shelf, and half stars are not that hard.
There are so many things they could do to make Goodreads just better and more accessible, and at times just work.
Yeah, just work. That's all. Just work. Just work. That's it. Amazon, you have money. Just fix it, please.
Yeah.
For the love of God, right?
Yeah.
The search is so bad. If you get one letter wrong, it sends you off to completely. Anyway, I could go on about this forever.
A couple of interns and some Red Bull will fix that in like a week, but I don't know why they don't do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess we all use it anyway, even though we bitch and moan about it. So they don't really have any motivation.
Well, that's just it. It's the biggest sort of book library platformy type thing on the internet. So make it work.
Right. The big debate was that versus Storygraph. I don't know if you guys have heard of Storygraph, but that's geared more towards booktubers, I think, very specifically. But it's so daunting to switch because there's going to be a period of time where I'm going to have to update both. I just
Like, why?
I can't bring myself.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Can't.
Why am I spending time on this? Like, I could be doing.
Right.
I could be reading a good book instead. You know,
I could actually be reading, right?
Yeah.
So
I kind of feel the same way every time like a new social media platform comes up and people are like, let's leave Twitter and go to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like,
yeah,
I know Twitter.
right.
I know how it works.
I don't know if it's because of the age groups of us and the people we tend to bring on here, but none of the people are ever on Book Talk, including us, because I just have not jumped on that train. I know it's the hot new spot. I know. I can't do it. I just can't learn another platform.
That app is scary.
Is it?
It is. It's very. Yeah. Look into what you give it permission to do when you install it. It's wild.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I haven't looked into that yet. I'm just saying that type of content, like the short form content, is not meant for me. So.
No.
No. Clearly, here we are talking for an hour and a half. I don't think it's meant for us.
Yeah.
Longer videos, they're more fun. What can you say in a minute? I don't know.
Right. And Aaron just showed up and said, "Hey, everyone." But and Book Talk, no, you. But we were just signing off. Thank you for stopping by. But we got distracted complaining about different apps. But if you're watching this stream and you somehow do not know who I am, my name is Taylor. My booktube channel is Made Between the Pages. If you want to hear more about Rob's books, I talk about them all the time as well. So you can hear about those on my channel as well. And you can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is always in the description of my videos. So that's where you can find me. And also, besides Steve on his channel for page doing, we are frequently on screen together. So
we visit often.
Yeah. Steve mentioned that we hadn't been on the same screen in like a week. He's like, I haven't seen you in forever. I'm like, yeah. It's been a week. But thank you so much to everyone who came by in the chat. And again, thank you so much, Rob, for coming on. This was wonderful. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was delightful. So look forward to the next episode of Page Doing on either Steve or my channel. You will see us share it on all of the platforms just mentioned. But we'll talk to you guys later. See you. Bye.